Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite-Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite-Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bite-Size Balance. I'm so happy to be here today. I've got such a wonderful guest for you. I'm going to be talking to Karla Adkins, who, like me, is a senior certified This Naked Mind coach. And Karla's on a mission to normalize not drinking and to help people make the shift from feeling shame to feeling courage. And that's exactly what she has done in her own life. After a life-altering event, her perspective on life changed. And through that experience, she created a safe, judgment-free zone where people can talk about their alcohol fears without being labeled. Drawing from her own experience, as well as her senior coach certification through This Naked Mind, Karla helps put people back in control of their lives by empowering them with the tools and knowledge they need to remove their desire to drink. In her free time, Karla spends time with her family, including her husband, daughter, and dog on the East Coast of South Carolina. And Karla is the author of a brand new book, which is absolutely beautiful. I had the pleasure of reading an advanced copy of it. It's called And She Came Tumbling Down, and it is available now on Amazon and through Karla's website at karlaadkins.com. You can find that link in the show notes. I'm so excited about this conversation. I think you're just going to find Karla so warm and lovely and honest, and just her story is just so, to me, just really so miraculous and uplifting. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Karla Adkins. Hi, Karla. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm really, really excited to have you here as well. I have been waiting for this book to come out since I heard you talking about it. But I think when the very first time I heard you talking about it, it was just more of like an idea and a dream, and it hadn't really gotten any legs to it yet. Yeah, but I thought it was such your story is just so great. I can't wait for you to share it with everybody. And I was saying to Karla before I hit record on this podcast, I read a lot of stuff. Like, people send me stuff, and I get a lot of people asking to be on the podcast, and oftentimes they have some things that they've published and they get sent along or whatever. And I read some of it, and it's just, this book that Karla's written stands out to me. I read it. I couldn't stop reading it. I read it from the beginning to the end. I think it's so well written and so good and so hopeful and so interesting and informative and just like lovely. So I can't say enough about the book, Karla. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. I purposely did not read books while I was writing it because I wanted to stay in my story. And I knew that was going to be where I could really write this thing properly, and not try and compare myself to others, because my story is different than everybody has their own unique journey. So I really did. I purposely stayed away from some big books that people were raving about, but I just wanted to really write from my heart and share this story in the way that, I knew it could help somebody.
Yeah, and you did such a good job, and I know it's going to help people. It's helped me. I was saying to Karla before the podcast, and this is obviously the world I'm in every day, all day, but it just provided me with some reminders and some insight that I didn't have, because Karla's story is really different than mine. Even though we're both, senior certified This Naked Mind coaches, and we're both alcohol free, our stories are really different. And I think that you all who are listening are going to find this just to be such a powerful story of a human ability to change. Yeah. And it's the piece that we don't talk enough about, is all this, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and you're kind of stuck where you are, and life happens to you. And, Karla's story is just the opposite of all of that. And I just love it for that. So let's start, Karla, because a big piece of your story around drinking is related to your anxiety, and that anxiety that you had, and it started really young for you. Do you want to talk about like what that anxiety looked like for you, and and how that connected to your starting to use alcohol as a coping tool?
Absolutely. Yeah. It did start young for me. I say in the book, I feel like I was born anxious. I didn't recognize it so much as a child, but, let's say moving into high school is where it really, really started to weave its way into my life. And, it started where I felt like something was wrong with me. I give the example in the book of being in a stadium and all of a sudden feeling off. And, feeling like I was going to pass out and then feeling like everybody was staring at me. So I was having some panic attacks is what they were, at that time. And again, we're talking about a different time. I mean, totally going to age myself here, but this is in, I graduated high school in 94. So we were not talking about anxiety like we're talking about it today. I'm so glad we've come a long way in that category, but my anxiety slipped in as feeling like I was different than other people. Something was wrong with me. And I kept it to myself and just struggled internally with that. And then it really brought its A game in college. And that's where I give the picture of where my anxiety, I started living my life around my anxiety. Talking about panic attacks, people that have had them before, they are intense and they are scary. And basically what happens again, and I didn't realize how our bodies, mind-body connection, but basically I started to become fearful of places where I would have panic attacks because my brain was associating what happened last time I was there. Right. So, and again, I actually talk about the grocery store. It started happening at the grocery store. And Wendy, I had no idea. Fast forward later on in my journey, I wrote a blog once about panic attacks in the grocery store. And you have no idea how many women reached out to me and said, oh my gosh, me too. And it's shame that keeps you shut silent. Cause it's like, why am I panicking going down and to get pasta and whatever for dinner? But it just started to take over. And then obviously in college too, it's the expectation. You drink in college, right? We are sending our kids off and saying, okay, that's basically the expectation. They're going to be drinking. That's where I look back and I see this dangerous combination of my mind going, oh, that made me feel better. I didn't experience the anxiety, when I had a few drinks, especially I struggled socially as well, just feeling out of place. And I thought alcohol helped. And so that's when I started using it as a tool. I say often I gave it a job. I like to use that expression because I think that makes sense to a lot of people. What I didn't realize is how alcohol works, and it's an addictive substance. So I gave it one job and then I was like, hey, I'm going to try it for this as well. So panic and then social anxiety, you name it. And then to feel relaxed before a date that I was nervous about. I thought alcohol made me a better version of myself, and even saying that makes me so sad. It makes me sad for myself. That's another thing.
So it's so common, don't you think? Like, I feel like common. I hear that all the time, and I can relate to that idea of that. And I think also, I love how you say you gave it a job, because I think that most of the women that I work with, and definitely when I think back on my own drinking, most of the women I work with gave it a job too. And it might not have been that particular job, but and your anxiety story is really acute in terms of how your anxiety manifested. But I see so many women who use it for milder versions of anxiety or for chronic anxiety as a tool, and they're definitely giving it a job.
Yes.
So I like that way of thinking about it.
I even had someone, and I loved it because she was able to have a great conversation with her daughter going off to school. She was like, felt overwhelmed, but all of a sudden I remember when you said, don't give it a job. and that clicked with her. She's like, okay, just don't go there and give it a job. It's something that can make sense. And like you're saying, we can replace that specific job with other things. It could be, stress. It could be, it's my way to disconnect at the end of the day. I mean, it's, again, you're giving it a job. And whenever we do that with a substance that is addictive, it can lead to dangerous territory,
Yeah, absolutely. I often say that to people when people ask me what's the, like, why is this a problem for me and it's not a problem for other people? And usually when we start talking about it, there is a moment for them. There was a moment, just like there was for me, where they gave it a job and they started using it as a form of medication for something to help them sleep, to help them manage stress or anxiety, to help them deal with social situations. Whatever it is, when you start using it that way, when you do give it a job, I think things change for people. I think that's the difference for people between being able to sort of take it or leave it socially, in many cases, and finding that becoming increasingly difficult.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that's when we give it roots, when you start giving it a job, and people don't realize that. And again, I think it's powerful to be able to have the conversation about that. And, really, we'll get more into this, I'm sure, later, but just changing that narrative of, the not drinking or else, just making it a conversation of, hey, guess what? This is what it does. This is what it is. And also, I had no idea for years that how much alcohol was making it worse, my anxiety, what it did to me. And as far as making that anxiety worse, I had no idea. I didn't know that until after I stopped drinking.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Karla? I've talked about that a little bit here, but I'd love your thoughts on that. Can you just explain how it did that? Both like how you can see that playing out just in terms of like looking back on situations and seeing the evidence of that, but then also like the science behind it and what was actually happening there.
Absolutely. I think I remember learning the science behind this and having just this almost like moment of this huge aha, but yet also anger. Like, why am I just now figuring this out? And maybe, what I didn't want to know, Wendy, for years. This is not a blame on other people, or they should have told me. This is just, I couldn't believe the information, but it made sense to my story. So basically, when you're drinking, you'll never get the feeling of drink one. No, there's drink two will never equal what drink one did. And that is because what happens inside of our body. And most people know that alcohol is a depressant. They will say that. And I would say that's fairly common knowledge, but they don't realize is that alcohol is not only a depressant, but it's also a stimulant. And whenever I like to have this visual of like the ship, our body is always working to maintain homeostasis. So keep that ship balanced in the sea, right? And there's constant things happening in our lives that are throwing things off, and the body counterbalances to get it back into homeostasis. And, when we drink alcohol, when I would have, drink, it would recognize that depressant come on board. And your BAC, your blood alcohol content is what gives you that kind of like that euphoria feeling, like, that felt good. And your brain remembers that. But again, the ship, that captain of the ship recognized that depressant. So it's going to shoot off some stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, to counteract what just came on their ship. And I like giving that visual just because that's what made sense to me. And it's very basic, but the thing that I didn't realize is that, while your body, again, it goes to work to break down that toxin that we just put in our body, says, hey, we need to break that thing down and get it out, where the stress hormones linger in your body for hours. I would say I recognize this the most in me. The next morning, a lot of people understand the term anxiety, where it's where you're highly anxious in the morning. And So it started that, the hamster wheel of me then not feeling good when I woke up, and that feeling anxious, and then waiting throughout the day to be able to then I'll just have a drink and I'll relax. I didn't understand what was going on in the ship. I just thought, oh, this is normal, at 5 or whatever, I'll have my drink and do happy hour with my friends, not realizing I was just starting that cycle and again, amplifying the anxiety in a big way.
Yeah. That's so great. I love that. I love that analogy of the ship. Can you talk about what you noticed? We're going to talk about your drinking story in a second, where it went and how it, kind of the peak of it and all of that. But can you tell me how long did it take you to notice that your anxiety levels had shifted when you let go of alcohol? So when you stopped drinking, how long? Because I'm always curious about that, because for me, I didn't have in any way the level of anxiety you had, but I did have chronic 3:30 in the morning. It felt insane to me, the anxiety. Like it was so bad. I'd have to get out of bed and go downstairs and try to clear my mind and drink tea and Google, am I an alcoholic, for the 4,000th time. I did that every night for probably a year. So that anxiety, I didn't call it anxiety at the time. I just thought it was like sleep disruption. Right. But now I can see so clearly that it was anxiety. And I was just blown away at how that disappeared after I stopped drinking right away. And I always laugh about how I was blown away because it's so obvious right now. But at the time I was so surprised that I just wasn't waking up at 3:30 in the morning anymore, freaking out about something, So for me, it was really instantaneous. And I'm curious, with the level of anxiety that you had, how long did it take? And how did you make the connection there in terms of the not drinking?
I'm so glad you asked that, because that's important for people to know, because it's not like my anxiety disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
However, I did, like you, all of a sudden, and again, I was pretty sick, and we'll get into that. So my healing journey took a little while, but I remember a few months into being alcohol, pretty early, month 2 or so, I myself went straight to Google once again and said, where did my anxiety go when I stopped drinking? I couldn't believe, because one of the things that I was holding on to so tightly, oh my gosh, I hung on to this, was that alcohol was the only thing that helped my anxiety. Right. I remember telling family that and friends that it's it's the only thing that works. When now, if I could again look at it with some fresh eyes and a different perspective, if alcohol was working, I would have been the calmest cat in the room, because it was, believe me, it was on board. So I did the same, where I felt this odd sense of calm, where my body wasn't this jacked up, waking up at a 10 each morning. It was just this, wow. It was very unfamiliar to me. I had not felt this in so long. And that's where the light bulb went off for me. And I started Googling it. And that's actually truly what sent me to find any grace in this naked mind, because I had been Googling like crazy, the same. Because I did not identify as an alcoholic at all. And again, we'll get into more of that. But the anxiety for me, it was just my body was starting to regulate. However, I then did go work with a good counselor on my anxiety. But I think this is the thing, that I went to counselors for years. And I always said it never worked. That never worked for me. They give me these tools and tell me to breathe. And I just laughed at them. You have no idea how intense my anxiety is. You clearly don't get me. What I didn't realize, I wasn't allowing any of those tools to work because I was drinking.
Right.
So, I went and really for relatively a short period of time, got some really great tools for anxiety, worked a lot around automatic negative thoughts that really clicked with me, made sense. And because my nervous system was, able to be in that calm state and learn, it worked for me. And again, I always keep medicine for anxiety, my counselor, they are in my toolbox ready to go if I ever need them,
Right.
you know, but the ability to really put those tools to work while not throwing, you know, that basically gasoline on a fire when it comes to, and that's what alcohol is, you know, it is that gasoline whenever you're throwing it on, for example, anxiety, it is just going to blow it up. So I did feel that sense of calm that you talk about. But then I did do work. I did work around, you know, because anxiety had been a part of my story for a long time. So really learning, okay, why do I have them at these big events? Why am I having it? And paying attention to the thoughts. So it still worked for me, but I really always want to encourage people, because sometimes we talk so highly, which again, I get it, that everything is so amazing when we stop drinking, but there's still work to be done.
Yeah, I think that's so important that you emphasize that. And that's why whenever I'm talking about my anxiety, I'd say it's like, it felt like incredibly acute at 3:30 in the morning.
Yes.
It was nothing compared to some of the anxiety and some of the anxious like stories of anxiety that I've heard from my clients, and definitely yours. And so I was lucky that way, in that it for me almost resolved itself entirely by the not drinking. But I never on this podcast want to advocate, you know, there's just one solution to anything.
Right.
When we're talking about this type, and we're going to talk about your story medically with alcohol, and obviously it's super complicated, and there are often lots of parallel treatments and supports that are necessary. But I do think with anxiety, it's almost like it just like leaving the alcohol behind for everyone that I've ever worked with. No matter the degree of their anxiety before they stop drinking, it's like leaving alcohol behind just ups your baseline. It's like it levels you out and allows you to, it just puts you in so much better position to access, like you said, all of the other modalities and treatments and actually have them be effective. I totally feel that. Like I'd had people talk to me about doing breathing exercises and a variety of things, meditation, like all of these things. I could never make those things work when I was still drinking, but it's amazing. It was amazing to me how much more capacity I had just to even like try those things after I stopped drinking. And I do think they were just far more impactful for me. And even now, just like 2-3 really deep, slow breaths, it's amazing what that'll do for my body.
Right. I make fun of myself of when I like had this little attitude, the counselor that was trying to tell me, I'm like, and now I share with people, I'm like, talk about immediate, you know, satisfaction of what it will do for my body of a few really good breaths when I just couldn't see it before. And, you know, there's great conversations to be had. You know, we could go on and on with counselors. You know, I have a dear friend she specializes in trauma, and having these conversations together, because now she, you know, before she works with people on certain things, she immediately talks to them about their drinking, because she says at the end of the day, I want my work to be impactful. And now what I've learned about alcohol and what it's doing, I know that's just getting in the way of it, me being able to be as impactful as I can.
Yeah. And that's so important. And I mean, this comes from your story. And I think when we talk about why you wrote the book, we'll talk about this, but I'm really passionate about this too. And I know that you are. No one through the course of all of the things that I've been through in my lifetime, which are all very different from yours, but lots of loss, lots of trauma, lots of grief, lots of stuff, lots of difficulty coping with all of that. I've never had one person ask me about my drinking.
Yeah.
In a meaningful way, in any of the modalities that I've sought support in, whether it's, you know, medical, my GP or a chiropractor, or, you know, it's just not part of the conversation, or a counselor or therapist. Like I've seen all kinds of people and it just never came up. And I just want to increase the awareness around the relevancy of that question, I guess.
Yes.
And how that, and it's not about assigning blame or being critical. It's that we're not talking about this enough as a society, and we're not providing it with the degree of relevancy that it actually has when it comes to a lot of these things that we struggle with in terms of our mental health and balance and wellness and physical health as well. So let's get into it. I want to talk about,
I know.
Now I'm like, we've been
that could be a whole other podcast.
I know. I feel like we could, maybe I'll have you back. We'll talk all about it.
Yes.
But I feel like we've set the stage for this. And now people are like, what happened to Karla? So
yeah.
Let's talk about how this all played out for you. And I know there's so much detail and story in all of this, but how did you go from a college student who was using alcohol as a way to manage anxiety to a person who was really very, very sick as a result of alcohol? Can you talk us through how you got there and what that looked like?
Absolutely. I give the description because it's alcohol weaving its way into my life, and all of a sudden I assigned it more and more jobs, and deep down, I was fearful, there was a part of me back in my head, and I kept thinking about, my parents and what I had learned about the word now that I despise to use because I feel like it's such a block for people as alcoholic. Like it was this black or white thing. Either you are or you're not. And so I feel like I spent so many years, just trying to prove that I was not, instead of truly asking myself, how is it serving me? How are you doing, Karla? Because you are not doing well. My anxiety just kept ramping up and where it really would make me physically sick. And so I feel like for years I lost this gauge. I think I lost trust with myself. I didn't know what was going on internally. I was always blaming it on the anxiety. And I think that's what happened the years leading up to me getting sick is, I was really good. I was a professional and doing well at my job. I spinning lots of plates and pretending like my life was fine when I knew at home, everything inside of me was crumbling. I was single at the time. So that allowed for a lot of time for me. Once I got home and shut that door, it was just me and my friend alcohol. Right. And I thought it was my friend, the one friend that understood me and helped. I wasn't like this person that went out and partied all the time. It was this slow, silent relationship that I formed. And when you look at the parallels between really toxic relationships and the relationship that I had, and I know many people that have with alcohol, they are so much the same when you talk about them, So for years, again, it just started getting more like doing the classic, okay, I'm going to limit myself. tried to put all these rules around myself. I'm not going to drink till 5. I'm not going to drink unless it's the weekend. I laugh at myself. One time I even said that I'm not going to drink wine during Lent, and then decided I would then drink white wine because I really drink red. Like it was ridiculous how I
Can I just make you feel better for 1 second on that? Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
I used to do cleanses with my husband. We would do 14-day cleanses where you weren't allowed to have gluten, sugar, or I don't know, I can't remember, dairy or something. I don't know. It was crazy. I mean, I'm so not a fan of cleanses now, but this was when I was, this was ages ago, but we used to do these all the time. And I would every single time convince myself that vodka was okay because it was made with potatoes, which were non-gluten, like every single time. So crazy, right? Like I cleanse, and I am convincing myself that the most toxic thing that I take in is actually okay.
Okay.
So and I hear you.
I want us to, I think again, the importance is to change the narrative so we can all have safe conversations like this and go, oh my gosh, because it resonates with people. And I thought because I was able to do Lent, I was just fine. One time I did stop drinking for Lent, and oh my gosh, Wendy, my body at the end, my eyes were so bright. My body was working. And I mean, I got this glow back. I had people asking me, they were like, what have you done to yourself? And it was just me stopping drinking. But all it did was at the end, say to myself, well, see, I'm not one of those. I stopped for 30 days or 40 days. So I'm good. So again, alcohol is just does what it does, where your tolerance builds. And again, because my anxiety had historically always been a very thing where it made me physically sick, I didn't know that I was getting into trouble. I didn't know that all of a sudden, my body was really trying to tell me I'm hurting here. But I think, my subconscious, I clearly knew. I tell in the book, and this is another thing that I look back and you see the insanity of it, but I would get in my car, get ready to go for work, and I would look at the whites of my eyes. It's like I was doing this check. And again, I talk about that because whenever I say that, it's something that I carried a lot of shame about for a long time. But when I shared it, there were so many people that were like, oh my gosh, I did that too. Because we know deep down, what we're doing cannot be okay for our bodies. And so I tell about this time that it truly, and I was busy at work. I had a wedding I was going to be in that weekend. Again, couldn't say no to people. That was another one of my problems that I had to learn about. But I did my classic look in the rearview mirror and I saw yellow. And it's hard to describe the feeling that I felt in that moment. It was, again, fear, absolute panic. But what was my tool for those things? What had I given a job for years? I didn't have any other tools to know what to do, but drink. And that was the weekend that my body just started shutting down. And my husband, he was just my boyfriend at the time, and another dear friend, they're both physicians. They knew, and I could tell I was very sleepy. I barely could keep my eyes open, and they took me to an emergency room. And it was just this feeling of all the plates that I had been spinning, shattering on the floor, like just losing control of my story, my narrative, my protection of that substance, because man, I protected that thing like no other. Like, it's not doing this to me. It's not. And went to the ER where basically I went by ambulance to a medical facility in Charleston, South Carolina, the Medical University of South Carolina, and was there for like a day or two. And I think at that point, I was still highly protective of the story. I was trying to pretend it could have been anything else but my drinking, people coming in and saying, how many drinks per day were you having? Blah, blah, blah. And I would just lie, and I don't know what's happening. They did end up letting me go. And again, I think they knew Grady was a doctor, so I wasn't going off anywhere. It was just the promise that I had to get blood work done, like 2 or 3 days from then. When I left that hospital, I had no idea. Obviously, I was not drinking, once I left the hospital. So I'm thinking I'm going to be fine.
Can I interrupt? Did anyone
Sure.
say, did anyone tell you how to do that? I'm just curious.
No.
I feel they're like,
No.
this thing that's happening to you is related to alcohol. Did they made that connection for you?
Oh yeah.
And then what did they say to you when they discharged you?
No, don't drink. Don't drink. And that's one thing I do want to say. Oh my gosh, I hope you get my book for so many things, but if not for anything, to the foreword of the book, which is actually one of my physicians, just so powerful.
So good. The foreword, I read it and I was hooked. I thought this is going to be a really great book, because the physician who writes the foreword just talks about her own experience as a treating physician for people for whom alcohol has started to cause major problems for them medically, and just how complicated it is both for physicians and for the patients. I thought it was amazing. I totally agree.
When I got that back from her, it was because obviously we still have a relationship to this day. And during that time, when I say I was at the Medical University of South Carolina, she was one of the residents. So one of the horrible things as a person that's covering themselves with shame is at a teaching facility, the physicians come in with a group of students.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's that multiple shame. And Dr. Jofflin is her name. She was this young, beautiful woman in this crowd of people hearing me. And she said, I could see the defensiveness all over you. And she talks about that in the foreword. We tell people to, just, you can't drink or else, but they have no tools to do so, because at that point, my brain, I had built these powerful pathways of that connection, my body telling me, you need this.
Mm-hmm.
But so basically they let me leave for a couple of days in the promise of getting blood work done. And I remember going to a local LabCorp to get my blood work, and my body was morphing into something I didn't even recognize.
Mm-hmm.
The fluid in my belly that was, just building up, I looked like I was very pregnant, and just the color of my skin was this yellow green. It was basically the people there were shocked when they saw me. And I remember being dropped off, and this is just a really emotional part of my story, because again, I'm still thinking, well, I've stopped drinking. It's been a few days. My body will get back on track. And I want to share this with people, because there's a point where we keep pushing, where sometimes there is no turning back. You hear these stories of, oh, your liver, it just gets back and it regenerates and it does all the things. Yes, it does. It is an amazing organ that does really big things, but there can be a point that it says, I cannot do this anymore. And I went and got dropped off anyway. And I know this now because of basically when critical labs come in, physicians get called right away when they're someone and it's very dangerous levels. And I remember sleeping. I was in a heavy sleep at home and my phone ringing. I knew it was Charleston because of the numbers on the phone, and I picked it up, and it gets emotional every time I tell this, but she said, is this you, Miss Kephart? That's my maiden name. And I said, yes. And she's like, are you okay? And I said, I think I'm dying. And she said, I think you are too.
Oh my God.
And and that person on the phone was Dr. Jofflin. She was a resident and had gotten that critical labs from me. And my body was shutting down. And I remember the next blow, she just said, can you get here? Is there a way that you can get here? If not, I'm going to be sending an ambulance to come get you. And that was another way, like just the seriousness of what was happening. Called Grady, he left work immediately. My parents, thank goodness, live close by. It was, it's a moment that it's forever changed me, to know that your life is in this hanging balance of, all the plates were down. I couldn't control the story anymore. And I was dying. And so went, back to the university, the hospital. And that's when I was there. I think I was probably there for 2 weeks. And again, it was touch and go. I was so acutely ill that it's not like they can really treat you. You were waiting basically for the liver to start working again, and to see if it's going to start working again, see if these numbers start turning around, or if they keep dropping. There's nothing they can do because you're so ill. And so it was it was just a time that, again, it changed my perspective forever. And I knew then, and actually there's another doctor that I write about in the book. I can't wait to send the book to him, because again, he's a young intern at the time. The physicians themselves, again, they've been doing this for years. They're over it. They're like, here's just this other drunk. And that's, just this alcohol, you did this to yourself, blah, blah, blah. And when you're already in this position of feeling so much shame, and you're hearing that, it's a painful combination. And once again, setting people up for, okay, you can never drink again. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to do that. I did have one intern, and he just looked at me and he was like, you can do this, and I just thought, I know I can do this. I want to live. I just definitely had the spirit in me that I wanted to live. And so I left the hospital there, and the rest of what happens, and we can get into that. But I just want to, do you have any questions about that so far, or else I'll keep spilling?
No, it's so, it's moving me so much to hear you. What's moving me the most, like I'm actually have tears right now, and I'm struggling with this. What's moving me the most is how honest you are about this, and how much this is going to help other people.
Oh,
and I know that it took a long time for you to feel comfortable sharing this. And, I want to talk a little bit about that when you're done sharing, because of course it did, but also how powerful it is when people actually just tell the truth. And also, the fact that you stand in personal responsibility around your choices with this. And also, but we also recognize that there were other people involved who could also do better. Like it's such a complicated problem, right?
It is.
Anyway, please keep going. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I left the hospital, and I was just on this, I was going to do whatever it took to get better. Again, my bilirubin was so high. And again, that's what turns people yellow, that color of yellow. I would sit out in the sun, because you always hear about the babies with the high bilirubin. You put them in the sun. So I'm just wanting for this miracle, like I'm just going to get better all of a sudden. And that's not how it looks. I mean, especially after being in the hospital for weeks, my muscles had atrophied so greatly. The ascites was so big. They do this procedure, it's called a paracentesis, where they go in to remove the fluid. I remember doing that for the first time. It brought so much relief, and I could finally eat again. That was another problem that I do talk about, because that's a common thing. Like once you, when your liver's getting sick, you lose your appetite, and especially with then fluid buildup, putting pressure on the tummy, you can't eat. So not only was my body trying to fight for me, I couldn't give it nutrients to so many things happen. I think I learned also all the things your liver does. It is a powerful organ, and have a beautiful respect for it.
Can I just stop you for 1 sec? I do have one question. What was the official diagnosis at this point for people listening? Like, what do they tell you? Do they say you're in liver failure? Have they started talking about cirrhosis and scarring? Like, what's the conversation?
At that point, I was still so sick. They attempted a biopsy of my liver. They went through my neck. I still have a little scar to go down and try and biopsy it. But the inflammation was just so bad. They couldn't get a definitive answer at that point. The words I heard, acute liver failure. Again, I'm still in this, because they couldn't really give me official diagnosis. When I look back, I'm still looking for a way to blame something else again. And this thought process is truly what sets me up to fail. In that because one, I'm scared to tell people, I don't want that association. I was extremely shameful, and you could tell I was physically very ill. And whenever you see someone with the fluid in the belly and they're yellow, I think liver, but there's no official diagnosis at that point. The goal was to get me healthier, start to do some scans to see exactly what damage had been done. So I did not have a full diagnosis yet, but I did get, and I do have the diagnosis of cirrhosis. I also did have, which I heard one of your podcasts I listened to with the woman that talked about the esophageal varices, which can be very dangerous. And again, all of this is because all the pressure on the liver, it's rerouting things throughout, like trying to get them to go away. And our esophagus is one of those. And the esophageal varices pose a very high danger of bleeds, where you can have, them rupture and then bleed. I am very happy to say, again, and that's where I want people to get the hope. That was something that I thought, and I had been told I would always have. And at this point, they're undetectable. So I do not have them, and I'm no longer being treated for them. Again, our body is beautiful, and it can heal. But I do have the diagnosis of cirrhosis that came a little bit later, though.
And cirrhosis, can you explain to people what cirrhosis is? Like, what does that diagnosis mean?
I like to do that. This is where, talk about doing some work, because I didn't talk about this. I remember sitting in coaches training and I did not talk about this. I was comfortable at that point to talk about my anxiety, because I feel like that was socially acceptable to do. Like, people, in this day and age, we can talk about that and self-medicating, but to talk about cirrhosis, I called it the C word. I had shoved down so much shame around that diagnosis. But I was actually working with my coach, and Lorna Wilson, she's amazing. And she could see me starting to unravel, talk about this, what my diagnosis was. And so the way I like to describe it is how I described it to her, because she's like, tell me what this is. Tell me what it is. And I was like, well, it's like a scab. When we fall down and hurt ourselves, our bodies form the scab. And so it's my wound. It's my battle wound. And me just using those words brought a huge flood of emotions. So for me to even explain it and that really start to look at, my body was fighting for me for so long, but there is a scab there. It's a hardening, on that organ. Again, which you can imagine the different levels of cirrhosis. So the more hardening, the more the liver's not able to function. Right. I'm still, again, September 10th will be 8 years for me. And I still have obviously a diagnosis of cirrhosis, but it has not changed. So my liver itself my liver functions are beautiful. My husband laughs all the time because he's like, your liver functions better than mine. But so there's no change to the liver, but I will always have to go look. So I always looking, because I also have higher risk for liver cancer. People don't think about that either. They always talk about the regeneration, but they don't think about the impact, on the liver. And so I go in every 6 months to have my liver checked, just to make sure there's no significant changes in that.
Mm-hmm. So how did it go for you? So was it a smooth, I want to talk about this because I think people assume that a shock a mental shock to the system and a really severe medical diagnosis can be on its own, can lead to like this like spontaneous sobriety for people. And it's I think it's such a dangerous assumption because it's so complicated. So can you talk about, because this is another thing I just loved about your book. I just love the honesty in the story here and how it's so real to me. And when I read it, I was like, yeah, of course, I can totally see how that happened. So can you tell people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I left the hospital, and again, I'm just on this journey, right? I'm changing my life. I'm not drinking. I, basically, watching everything that I ate, really doing this total body. I wanted to do this right. And I wanted to do it my way. And I tried to go to AA meetings, but I had done that years before, and it just never jived with my story, or how I did not identify with that at all. Again, feeling like people looked at me like that was me trying to just make an excuse, but there's a real truth behind that. I just didn't identify as that. And I was searching for people like me, but during that time, I'm doing it on my own. I am going to some meetings. I'm feeling good. I feel good, and with that time away, from alcohol, and what happened was I started to get sick again. One thing that I didn't mention earlier that is very true is that I did get some low-grade fevers before I got so sick. So not a true fever, but just low grade for me, fevers like 99.9, where clearly my body was showing me something was going on. That started to come back, and there was a lot of fear there. I got in touch with Dr. Joplin right away. I'm not feeling well. Something's wrong. And at this point I was really scared. It had been months without drinking. So to start getting sick again, was very scary. And so, she wanted me to get, scanned, blood work, you name it, right away. And, turns out it was mono. And so this is where I see the power of, I truly, during that time that I was alcohol free, I felt great. But I didn't work on any of those jobs that I gave it, the beliefs that I had around alcohol. I still believed that alcohol God, it helps with anxiety. Gosh, it helps with, me feeling myself and me being able to not be stressed out. I still believed all those things were true. I was just told I could not do it.
Right.
And so it's just what I didn't learn till later. I can look back and you see me sitting up. There was no way I was going to be successful with the way, just not drinking and just get moving on. Because as I talk about, life throws you zingers, life throws you things. And then all of a sudden your body's like, oh my gosh, I have this big feeling. And my subconscious is like, girl, I know how to hook you up. You know what helps with that, right? It does not compute the whole, it just made you sick. Like it doesn't, because you still think it serves you. And so, with getting that, and then I got good old Google, and it was showing me like how, mono can impact your liver. It can cause, basically, you turn yellow, all of these things. And that ignited the thought, I can drink again.
Right. So mono actually caused all of this. It's been mono all along.
Mono caused all of this.
Yeah.
And again, you can, I think we talk about it a lot in coaching. It's confirmation bias. You can Google your answer. If you can find enough information, ooh, see, it does do that. And then people, and because I did have high inflammatory markers, you name it, it was mono the whole time. But what I'm looking back is so interesting is I kept that all in my head. I didn't share with anybody oh, this is mono. This is, it was mono the whole time. I can drink again. Right. So there was a part of me that knew, but I kept it to myself. And I drank again, and I'll never forget, going and getting just this small bottle of red wine. I was going to make it look romantic and really nice. Again, totally by myself, mind you. And, had a glass of wine. And that was the start. I had no idea how slippery that slope was going to be. And I felt fast. I mean, it was before I knew it, I was right back to where I was before. And then I had the double whammy of knowing how sick I had gotten, knowing all of that. The shame was just unbearable. I can't tell anybody I'm in trouble again. I can't tell them, because who would do that? Who would go through my knowing that I was dying, finally getting out of the hospital, and then do this again? I can't tell anybody. And it's a really hard part of my story to tell, but again, if I'm going to tell it, I need to put it all out there, because it seems like insanity, and it is. But when you learn, like you and I, Wendy, have really learned about the brain and how it works and those attachments to those beliefs that we've been taught for so long, it was inevitable for me to drink again. Unless I learned that those things, the truth about alcohol and really what it was doing to my body, ultimately the subconscious wins every time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. And thank you for sharing that, because like this happens to everyone, guys, like everyone, like, and Karla and I know this now because we do this and we work with women, like hundreds of women all the time. And we see it happen. And I tell my clients this, like, this is part of the process. And I think it's such a great example that you're giving of how important it is to root this from a place of abundance instead of deprivation, which is where you were. They're like, now you can't do this anymore. And that's all you had. And you're just hanging on by your fingernails through all of this. But your brain is still telling you all the same stories about why you need this thing and what it's going to do for you. And of course, it's crafty and it's going to come up with a reason why it's okay for you to do that. And whether it's like the extreme reason that happened with Karla, or it's like, oh, look at this. I was able to take a break for a month. I'm actually fine, right? Like the stories that it tells us are different, but it leads to the same thing. And almost everyone I talk to says exactly what Karla just said, which is it starts off as like kind of romantic and awesome. I love how you're having a date with yourself, by the way.
Oh yeah. Totally
done that.
How romantic is that? Right.
Totally done that. But it starts off as like just a glass of wine or a small bottle. And before you know it, you're back where you were. So thank you for sharing that. It's so, again, this is all the honesty that I just loved about this book. I think it's going to be so helpful for people because it's not just Karla's story, even though Karla's got all of this, you know, these particular details that might not be your details. Like this is how alcohol works. And so the piece of, so now I want to know, okay, so how do you get from there to freedom, which is where you are now? Like, it feels like, how's that even possible for someone when you're in that, like, really, I can just imagine when you were talking, how stuck you would feel in the shame of all of that, because you're a human being and because of the way the medical system would treat you. So how'd you get where you got to with this? Like, it's amazing.
Well, I had to go through a whole other sickness, you know, and this time it really was touch and go. At this point I was married. And you know, Grady is an amazing man. Can I just say that, to go through all of that and stick by my side? I say we went through in sickness and health right away. So he's pretty amazing. But once again, my liver went into failure. You know, it was just one of those things. You know, I really had a powerful moment with Dr. Jofflin. I also talk about Dr. Allen a lot in my story. She wrote the afterword in the book. She was the one that cared for me after, and it was a big part of me getting better too. You know, Dr. Jofflin, when I was hospitalized, Dr. Allen had to send me to the medical university again. She came into my room and she talks about this in the foreword, but she just decided to do things a little bit different, you know, and really look at me as a human and basically say, I know you can do this, you know. And she told me her journey, you know, and her, like, what alcohol looked like in her life and her family's life, and why she worked with liver, you know. And there was just this huge aha. She's like, you don't have to drink anymore. It was this shift in the way I looked at it. Here's this young professional woman saying I can do it. Look at her beliefs around alcohol, and she sees what it does. And it was just a moment. I remember thinking, I want to do this for somebody one day in that hospital. I mean, here I'm still, I want to give that feeling to somebody one day. And I think when I left there, because I knew if I went back there, it was death for me. So there was curiosity and an open mind. I wanted to learn everything I could about why was all this stuff happening? Why did I go back? That was absolutely insane. But I was really determined. I did not want a life that was the idea of one day at a time sounded painful. I'm like, is it going to be, I'm going to want alcohol all the time? Like, that sounds horrible to me, like horrible. And in doing, my research and finding, you know, This Naked Mind, and just then hearing the science is what blew me away. It completely aligned with everything that had happened in my story. It's one thing I tell clients all the time: alcohol is actually really pretty predictable. The thing that's scary is that we as humans are all made differently. Because I do get questions a lot, Wendy. People want to know exactly how much I was drinking.
Yes. It's like, it's annoying, but I get it. But I get it because
I get it too.
When I was still drinking, that's what I wanted to know too. Cause I wanted to be able to tell myself that I was totally okay. And I wasn't as bad as this person and it wasn't a problem. So I get it when people ask it. So when I say that it's annoying, it's not to be critical because
I would have been doing the same thing. I had done it before. But there is a reason why I don't get into specifics because of the comparison game.
Exactly. Yeah.
And because what my body couldn't handle is totally different for somebody else, and physicians will tell you that it's very frustrating for them. They'll have someone, that should be completely, there's no way they should still be here. And they're just fully functioning and still drinking. It's insane. But other people that they have seen, at the whole 2 glasses a night, and they come in with acute hepatitis, inflammation of the liver. We are all made differently. And so I don't share exacts with people because I know what I would have been doing the same thing. I would have been putting myself, so I'm okay because I'm not doing that.
Right.
It just doesn't work like that. The powerful thing for me was breaking down those beliefs one at a time. And I was just so excited and to see like the combination of how I felt and basically getting my life back. I would go through what I went through again any day to be where I am today. And to be a person that the people that knew me in that world, they're always shocked. Like the fact that I'm even doing this podcast with you, that Karla would never have like I made myself small all the time. And just the freedom. I think that's the thing too, is I didn't know freedom was possible, like where you just didn't think about it. And this is, someone, I was not a gray area drinker. Let's just put it that way. I was not in that category. Mm-hmm. This can happen for anybody. The freedom, you can break free. But again, I shared in the book that you have to start with you. You cannot blame everything in your life or whatever. We all do. There are hard things, hard stories, but alcohol will take you down. Yeah. And I got a front row look at that, of what that was going to look like and the pain. And so, I had to work on my shame around the cirrhosis. I had to work on that. But once I did, and this pandemic hit, seeing what our society did around alcohol just caused this fire in me. And
I was thinking of that when you were talking about like this, how it can affect, and it, how it's like that. In law, we call it like the thin skull or the crumbling skull. Like when something happens to someone, how dramatically and traumatically it affects them depends on the condition they were in when it hits. And so it does, it's not just about how much you drink, it's about all these other factors as well. And I was thinking about the incredible spike in alcohol-related liver disease in young women that's happened during the course of the pandemic, and how, that's maybe a good example of that, like that, was not necessarily anticipated. It's a shocking statistic. So I'm with you on that. Like
the numbers are climbing, and that, we talked earlier about like why I wrote the book. And I truly, I was trying to do everything but share my story, because there's a lot of fear in this, Wendy. I am scared. I'm putting it all out there. And, but what won in the end was my passion to put my story out there because of what was happening, because of this dramatic rise, especially in young women. I was hearing some doctor speak, or, it was told to me that he, was a specialist like Dr. Jofflin in their field. And after what happened in the pandemic, the shocking numbers, like he now has 20-year-olds on his transplant list to waiting for a liver. And I just couldn't keep silent anymore. And Dr. Allen said once to me, because she's like, Karla, I'm just going to tell you, you got some serious street cred. you got some serious street cred. So you need to put it out there. And so the book is what bubbled up from that. Like I couldn't stay silent anymore. And the way to do that, and the whole, like, really tell people the story of how it kind of started weaving its way. And then what happened, is where the book was born. And, if it helps one person, it's totally going to be worth it. But it's time that I also wanted a voice for where people have gotten sick. I think there's shame around that too, where, you can't be helped, but I can. It's not that if I can be helped, I'm telling you right now that anybody can. But it does take looking in the mirror, and but to me, that's exciting, because you finally are like, you can get your control back. You empower yourself. You are not powerless. You have so much in you. And it will never get old for me, ever, seeing people find freedom from the substance. It will never get old for me. It's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, it really is. And I feel like we're so lucky that we get to be there for that every day. I mean, it's the reason I do what I do. And I just want to say one more time, just how phenomenal I think it is that you share this story. I remember listening to you we have a mastermind group for certified coaches with This Naked Mind, and we meet regularly. And I remember listening to you at the beginning about just your sheer terror about starting to talk about this and sharing it, and how far you've come with that in such a short period of time. And I can just hear it in your voice today. It's just the pride around this instead of the shame. And I think that's so amazing. And it has already helped people. I told you that before the podcast started. I got some amazing insight from this that's been helpful to me, and in supporting other people. So it's going to help so many people. The book is called And She Came Tumbling Down. It's available now, which is exciting. By the time this podcast airs, it's available. It's going to be so exciting. And you can access the book through Karla's website, information about the book at karlaadkins.com. And I'll put that link in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Is there anything we didn't talk about, or anything you want to add, Karla?
No, I think we need a part 2 at some point, though. I could go on so many different routes with you. Just, this was amazing. Thank you for giving me the space to talk about it. I remember messaging you like, hey, I'm going to do this book thing. Can I be on your podcast sometime? You're like, absolutely. So thank you for allowing me the space to talk about it. And it was a really cool experience. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's absolutely been my pleasure. And I just know that this is one of those episodes that people are going to talk about and just say how resonant and helpful it was for them. And it's going to get shared and forwarded on to people who will benefit from it. So thank you for sharing so honestly. I know how scary that is. I remember the first time I did it. My story is different from yours, but I think we all carry shame. And it is, the only way to dry that shame up is to air it, give it a good air. That whole, that idea of you sitting outside in the sunshine. That's what I was thinking about. Like, just dry up the shame. I always think, if you lift the rock and let the sun hit shame, it starts to disappear. And talking about it is such a beautiful way to do that. So thank you so much for being so open and honest and on this podcast today. I appreciate you. And I would absolutely love to have you come back sometime and talk. I'd love to talk to you about the process of writing the book, because as most people who are listening to this podcast know, I'm, sort of doing something along those lines right now. And it's just been, it's been something. It's been, So
we could definitely talk about that too.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thanks so much, Karla, and congratulations again on, And She Came Tumbling Down. And for you guys listening, I really encourage you to read this book. It's so wonderfully done. You're going to love it. Thanks, Karla.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.